Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. While we wait for people to join, please introduce yourselves in the chat, and you can also add which organization or state you're joining us from. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just one more minute. Just a reminder, if you're joining us, please introduce yourselves in the chat and add which organization or which state you're joining us from. Thank you again and good afternoon. We are so excited to see you all, and we are grateful for our panelists who are going to be sharing their expertise with us today. Before we get started, I just want to get some logistics out of the way. This webinar is going to be provided in English and in Spanish, and that's why we're asking all attendees to please go to the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. Este seminario se ofrece en inglés y en español. Es por eso que le estamos pidiendo a todos los asistentes que por favor vayan al icono del globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccione su idioma preferido. So I'll give everyone a few seconds to please select your preferred language. All right, thank you all for selecting your preferred language. At the end of the panel, we will also have an additional question and answer portion. Please send your questions in the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as time allows. And finally, this webinar will be recorded, and all the recordings will be shared with everyone who registered for the webinar. So now let's get started with our webinar. My name is Alejandra Lindana Gomez. I am a policy analyst on our childcare and early education team at the Center for Law and Social Policy. For those who are just hearing about CLASP, our organization focuses on advancing policy solutions to improve the lives of people with low incomes. Our team serves as a bridge between the local, state, and federal levels, facilitating communication to advance policies that support families' access to childcare and early education. Our team supports the formulation of policy proposals, offers technical assistance, and connects with local communities to understand their needs. So today we're going to hear from childcare workers, organizers, and policy analysts on how they helped New Mexico pass a constitutional amendment to fully fund a state child care program. They'll share how they built trust, partnership with one another, and the administration over the years to increase their collective impact. We hope that this conversation will provide valuable insights and lessons learned for all of you who are joining today, and that you're able to translate what you hear today to your own advocacy efforts in your states. I want to get us started by introducing our amazing panelists. So first up is Rosalinda Dorado Mendoza, who is originally from Chihuahua, Mexico. When she was 3 years old, her family migrated to the United States, looking for a better life for their entire family. New Mexico became her new home, and they resided in Albuquerque's South Valley area. Rosalinda is a first-generation student at the University of New Mexico. At a young age, Rosalinda engaged in economic, social, civic, and civil justice work with multiple nonprofit organizations. In 2010, her older brother's deportation following a routine traffic stop further propelled her towards a career in the nonprofit sector, where she focused on educating the community about their rights. In 2016, Rosalinda started working for El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos as their first civic engagement coordinator and helped create and establish their sister organization, El Centro de Poder y Acción. Through her work, Rosalinda witnessed the positive impacts of collective efforts and remains committed to ongoing campaigns and community-led projects driven by her deep passion for social change. Next, we have Aileen Castellan Gonzalez, and is a campaign and projects director with the Semilla Project and Dreams in Action, New Mexico. She began her work in advocacy after working with DACA recipients like herself. Working with undocumented families provided her the opportunity to empower and assist individuals in her community. After graduating from the University of New Mexico with 2 bachelor's degrees in criminology and in Spanish, she began participating in outdoor activities with the Semilla Project, where she gathered the courage to politicize herself in a way that hopes will bring healing and justice to her communities. She's passionate about the intersection of climate, justice, equity, and education. She joined Semilla Strategies in 2021 as an independent contractor, bringing her clients like Dream in Action New Mexico a new voice in the political landscape. Aidel Natachu is an early educator with over 17 years of experience. After joining the organizers in the Land of the Enchanted in 2019, she subsequently took on a leadership role in early childhood education. Her focus lies in teaching young children and advocating for the prioritization of early education funding by mobilizing child care workers. Additionally, Aidel is enrolled in the tribal member of El Pueblo of Zuni, further informing her perspective and approach to her work. And finally, Jacob Vigil joined New Mexico Voices for Children in 2018 to focus on anti-poverty initiatives, including economic security, safety net, and early care and education policies, which he's done through research and statewide outreach and advocacy. Prior to joining New Mexico's Voices for Children, Jacob worked on advocacy and coalition building in Illinois and in California on early childhood and children's health issues. He also worked as a government relations representative, advocating for quality subsidized childcare in several Western states. Before entering public policy, Jacob was a social worker and educator. He holds a BA in Latin American history from Pomona College and a master's in social work from Loyola University. I'd like to give a special thank you to Jacob, who was my partner in crime pulling this webinar together. I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your eagerness to share your story with those advocates who are joining us today so that we may continue to change early childhood systems across the country. Jacob, I'll now hand it over to you to get us started with some background information on what is happening in New Mexico and to get us started with the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Alejandra, for those great introductions. Speaking for myself and my colleagues here on the panel from New Mexico, we're really grateful for the partnership with CLASP in hosting this webinar, and we're excited to discuss our work in early childhood advocacy. And so before I turn to the panel, I want to give just some context for everyone for this discussion by talking a little bit about the policy landscape in New Mexico and just sort of setting the stage as to why we're here and how we got to this point. So New Mexico, I'm born and raised in New Mexico, so I'm very proud to call it home. It's a place of tremendous cultural and natural richness. It's a place abundant in natural resources and strong, deeply rooted communities. However, our state has faced many challenges relating to child well-being, challenges that are rooted in systemic and historical racial disparities. Our state is often ranked last in the nation in child well-being. 28% of the kids in our state younger than 5 live in poverty, and that's one of the highest rates in the nation. And our children experience among the highest rates of adverse childhood experiences in the nation. We're a majority people of color state, and in fact, over 75% of all children in New Mexico are non-white children of color. So that's why that we and our partners find it so important to frame investments in early childhood programs as a matter of racial equity. We strongly believe that these policies are part of reversing the historical and structural forces that have kept our kids from thriving. So we made a huge leap forward in this in 2022 with the passage of a bold and unique constitutional amendment for early childhood funding. Conceived of over a decade earlier by New Mexico Voices for Children and other advocates, the amendment took years to pass in the state legislature before it could go before the voters. And a diverse, dynamic, and largely BIPOC-led coalition of communities and organizations, some of whom are represented on the panel here today, succeeded in getting out the vote, and 70% of New Mexico voters approved it. Now, the amendment allows for a portion of our state's land grant permanent fund to go directly to programs like pre-K, childcare, and home visiting through our early childhood education and care department. So I might say ECD from here on, but that's referring to our state's cabinet level department for early childhood education and care. So that recurring permanent source of funding was added to the existing early childhood trust fund, and it arrived at a time when federal COVID relief funding was set to expire. That funding had allowed our state to implement bold and ambitious policies to expand access and support early childhood care and education, including free childcare for families up to 400% of the federal poverty level, elimination of co-pays, and increased rates and pay for providers and teachers. Now, with the new state sources of funding, the ECD, the Early Childhood Department, has been able to dramatically increase pre-K and home visiting and continue the expansion of childcare access. Now, our panel today represents the coalition that fought so hard for the constitutional amendment, but what we will be speaking a lot about today is also their work after that campaign through the legislative advocacy and partnership with the state administrators and lawmakers, which protected the gains that have been made, continued to make sure that early childhood was prioritized in the state budget, and built the power of BIPOC communities to advocate for these two-generation approaches. So we hope that by highlighting the role of partners who have not traditionally been a part of early childhood advocacy, such as community-based partners working on immigration issues, workers' rights, and with strong leadership from young people and underrepresented communities, we can provide a useful template for how positive change can be achieved in other states. So without further ado, we'll turn to the panel, and I'll begin by asking the panelists, what brought you to this work specifically? What motivated you to advocate for childcare and early childhood education? I'll throw it to Rosalinda. You could start us off.
All right. So again, thank you everybody who's joining us today. My name is Rosalinda and I work with El Centro. And what brought me to this work of childcare is we noticed the need in our communities to ensure that our future children, especially our members' children, we're a base that majority of our members are from low-wage families. So even education at such a young age is a privilege that sometimes many of our members can't afford or can't bring to their children. And we know in New Mexico, the poverty levels are tremendous. And for our communities who are not fully English proficient, it makes it even harder for them to be able to advocate for these resources. And when our government isn't investing back the money that they have into these communities of color, well, we get always the short change, especially our children. So we wanted to get involved and ensure that every child, regardless of how much money their parents are making, isn't a factor for them to be able to have access to early childhood education. And also a lot of our members, especially our women, are in these industries and the wages that they're winning aren't sufficient to bring back bread, milk, eggs back to their house. They had to make decisions about leaving the jobs that they like and joining other workforce for them to be able to make meat at their house. So we want to ensure that workers in this industry are also paid dignified wages. So that's what brought us into ensuring that this constitutional amendment was passed and our work continues to advocate that these resources are properly allocated where our communities need them.
Thank you, Rosalinda. Do you want to go next, Ividel?
Hi, my name is Ivy Dalnadachu. I'm an early childhood educator, and that's what motivated me to get into this work. During the pandemic, especially, we were, the daycare that I was working at was open to serve essential workers, and we were risking our health as well as our families. And so I researched to see if there will be some kind of like hazard pay for childcare workers. And as I was strolling on Facebook, I came across a post from Olay, and my prayers were answered. They were doing a survey on who's open and who's working through the pandemic, and that's what started me in this work. All my colleagues that loved their jobs were leaving, and they were going out to look for work that paid more. And so that's what motivated me as an educator to stand up and speak out for my colleagues and myself, that we need, we were recognized as essential workers as well. And, we deserve to get compensated for our hard work that we've been, working hard to get our education. We have our different levels of education. We have different years of experiences, and I feel that in order to keep teachers in the early childhood education, we needed to have higher wages and benefits to keep them in their careers. Thank you.
Thank you, Avidel.
Yeah, and I can maybe go next, and hopefully you guys are able to hear me. Apologies, I was having some technical issues, but what really brought us into this work was sort of a sense of urgency in our communities. We needed to address, especially in our rural communities where there exist a lot of childhood deserts. There was sort of this need of wanting to increase that conversation, and Jacob mentioned our front. There were a lot of folks holding the line and really, pushing for this. And we needed that investment in our youth. We realized that investing early on would be the best way to, get this sort of thing moving and to understand that it's a need for our communities. Especially, I think the pandemic really highlighted how necessary it was, how there wasn't an abundance in this, and how there was a need to address that. And so for us, it was really listening to our communities, which have been advocating this for a long time, and then, continuing that push and really working together to see how we can, get to that goal. And so for us, it came from urgency, and it came from that need of wanting to be a part of this.
Thank you so much. The next question, so recognizing that, some of you were all involved in the constitutional amendment campaign, but also the legislative advocacy and after that, what strategies did you use to build trust, to have, to make sure that this coalition was successful and address some of the challenges that it takes to build and sustain a strong, diverse coalition with BIPOC leadership, with leadership from people of color? And I'll throw that out to whoever wants to tackle that first.
I can start. Well, first off, like Eileen said, recognizing the people that were leading this campaign for years. El Centro got involved later on in the game, as it wasn't something we usually focus in. So we really thank the people that have been leading it and helped us also understand the process, helped us understand how to talk to our membership about this, and just really good coalition work. I think the constitutional amendment really showed the amazing work grassroots organizations led by their members, the real heavy hitters, the amazing work that they've been working and doing collectively, and also allowing their members, especially the teachers in this industry, the parents who are impacted by this, and the children as well, to help us pass this. And also being able to talk to our members and giving space for them to lead their stories, their impactful stories, the teachers and their stories, and why it's so important for us to ensure that we are investing and continue to invest in education. As Jacob said earlier, New Mexico does not have the highest rate of education, and we don't have the highest rates of retention either. We just also made our university free, and even like that, we're still lacking teachers, nurses. So how can we ensure that we are giving every child the opportunity to be able to succeed and want to stay in New Mexico? We need to start investing in our state, and it's beautiful, the collective work that we were able to do. During the constitutional amendment, like Jacob said, we had to get voters out to vote, and we also don't have a really good participation rate of our voters, especially in rural areas, communities of color who have for years been ignored. And now we see a lot of organizations getting involved in elections and ensuring that our voters know, hey, there's a really important thing that's going to be impacting your children, your future, your community. Please get out there and vote. So I think those relationships that we've been able to build with voters has been the key of how we got 70% of voters to vote yes for the constitutional amendment in favor. Like, that's extremely powerful and shows the work and the effort of these nonprofit organizations, what they were able to do. So it's really amazing. And we continue to work together. And now we're showing up in masses to the legislation to talk to elected officials about how we can ensure that we're working together to ensure these funds go back to our communities. So thank you.
I think one of the important strategy is just to communicate to your members, to teachers. I made an effort to go to visit childcare centers to talk to directors and teachers, which some was a negative experience, but all in all, just reaching out to the community. We OLA members, we went out to different communities. We handed out flyers. We personally talked to people, just letting them know what our goals are, and that, you know, early childhood education is important because it develops a foundation for the youngest children.
Thank you. Thank you both. It looks like we lost Eileen for a little bit, but yeah, I really appreciate everything that you highlighted. I think that from our perspective as an advocacy and research organization, having longstanding relationships with El Centro and OLE. OLE stands for Organizers in the Land of Enchantment. That's who Ividel works with. We have worked together for years, and we worked together on many different issues that were not necessarily early childhood related. And that was just a big part of why I think we were able to be so effective, is that we had that trust built over working on many different types of campaigns. And it's a small community here in New Mexico where everyone, you know, kind of knows each other. But it really takes building those relationships and that trust to make sure that you have a coalition that can stay together and be united and pursue that common goal. Thank you so much. Eileen, thanks for joining us back. Was there anything you wanted to add about just sort of what makes for a good, successful, diverse coalition strategies?
Yeah, and apologies for that, but you know, some of the strategies that we utilized that were very important that we learned through the work that we were doing as a collaboration was how to begin thinking about organizing as a year-long thing, really starting really early on so that, you know, we can sort of onboard a lot of our community folks who this is their first time ever, you know, being at the polls. This was their first time ever, you know, registering to vote, and, you know, and so really thinking about organizing in a year-long programming or year-long thing was really different for us because we always start, you know, very late, and it always becomes this really huge thing and we get a bunch of people. But then how do we think about that, you know, starting in April and then, you know, transitioning and keeping them motivated and keeping them engaged? And yeah, it was really great the way we did it because we all worked together. We all had events that were really fun that we all got to go to. And as mentioned, you know, we got involved teachers who really helped us create lesson plans that helped us, you know, see how we can incorporate a lot of the things that they were teaching us. And so yeah, it was a great and very successful thing. And I'm very excited because it now pushes us to do more year-long programming and thinking about how we continue that organizing and that momentum as we do more things with this coalition.
Thank you so much. The next question, just for the sake of time, we might just have a couple panelists respond, but what can decision makers, so that's state administrators, secretaries, legislators, and others, what can they do to engage with advocates and organizers and hear their concerns and work together on shared goals, particularly around early childhood, but in general as well?
I can go. So a couple of things that we have started. Some of the groups are still very involved and trying to ensure that in the next legislation, we have better communication, we have better relationships with elected officials who are empowered to make decisions on how this money is going to be put in the budget. So we want to make sure to continue to engage with these elected officials and to uplift the voices of the teachers, their stories, their reasoning of why they're in this industry. I mean, they're sacrificing so much. Some of them have years of experience that their wages are not reflected upon on what they're receiving. So we want to make sure to have like a career ladder for those teachers to be able to receive dignified wages and could stay in this industry, as well as we have childhood deserts, and we want to make sure our elected officials help us see through a plan of how could we fix this situation, especially in rural areas, so that way all children have access to early childhood education. So we want to ensure that we have really good communication, relationships, and that they're able to meet with teachers, parents, even children, of why it's important for us to have this as a priority in our budget for the next legislation.
It's also important that they are engaged, and some of the things we tried is we invited them to some of the daycares to work for a day in daycare and see how it really is. And I think we invited at least 3 elected officials, and I know one of them wasn't very supportive of early childhood education, but once he went into a daycare and stayed most of the day to see what goes on, what teachers do, and that changed his mind. So it's really good that decision makers are involved. That way they can hear the stories and see, the hardship of what the workers in the childcare industry are going through, and also the parents, how much they're paying to, have their to have quality care. And so it's good to invite them to your events and let them know what's going on with the community.
Thank you, you all, and I'm glad that Rosalinda, you mentioned budgets, because at Voices we're known to be the experts on the state budget, right? And that a lot of the focus shifted from the Get Out the Vote campaign to this budget advocacy, which is not easy to sort of figure out, where are those levers, where are those places where we can influence how the budget is put together. And we didn't take it for granted that even though we had this permanent fund now that the voters had approved, that the lawmakers still had to appropriate that. And the devil is in the details in terms of how they could move that around or still not prioritize the needs of communities. So it was really great to see Rosalinda, Eileen, Avidel, and many others in those finance and budget committees in the Capitol, making sure that our voices were still heard, that the fight wasn't over. We were going to make sure that the lawmakers in the appropriations process, that they put kids first. And as you both said, having the stories and seeing why, hearing from teachers and communities why it's important is so critical, because it's not just about, well, we're very flush with money right now. We're in a good budget year, and we can point to the statistics that say here's the unmet need. But to make those stories real human and concrete, that was just such a really important part of what you all brought to this process. The next question I have is, what was the relationship? And this is partly because we might have some state administrators from other states on this webinar. But what was the relationship between the coalition and our state's early childhood and education and care department, Secretary Gerginski, some of you might remember, as you saw it, how did the coalition and the department coordinate or support each other from what you were able to see?
I'll go. As I saw it, the coalition and ECD did work together. We provided support, again, with the teachers, parents attending legislative sessions to provide support for the negotiations that were going on in the legislative sessions. And I just saw that everyone worked together, and it felt good to be part of that.
Yeah, and I would add that I feel like we were having very important conversations where we were very honest about where we were all at. It's one thing to hear, that, yeah, we're in support, but it's another to hear that they're using some of the language that we come up with, some of the things that we were, talking with teachers about, what are the things they want to advocate being used by them. So it was really important for us to be able to sit down with folks and to really get down as to where we're all at so we can align together, because it always seems different when you're at the legislature. You're always like, yeah, we have the votes, but then something happens. And so for us, it was very important to be at the table beforehand and to hear their voices, to hear that they're using our words and the language that we were advocating for. Because for us, it was very important that it wasn't just, childcare. It was like there's education involved, and it's more than just, giving back to our communities. It's about, creating the structure that's really going to get us to the next phase, which is a big structure that we have to build out, and it's going to take a long time. It's necessary to start having those conversations early on so that we can continue to have that trust that we're building. And so, for me, I felt like, we had a good working relationship, that we were able to sit down and again, hear them out, and that throughout the time and continuing forward, that we will continue to have those conversations so that we really flesh out this infrastructure in the way that we want to, and in the way that we know we can as a community.
Go ahead, Rosalinda.
Yeah, I definitely highlight what my colleagues just mentioned. I don't know if folks on this call know, but New Mexico tends to have a 60-day session and a 30-day session. So when the legislation comes, we are like grinding and hustling because we have such limited time with our elected officials. So now this time around, we want to start very early on to build those relationships. But I did see a lot of communication. Like Eileen said, we were all collectively trying to work on the language, on how we want to be talking about this, how we could strategize together, who are our targets, who needs more persuasion, who needs more information. So it was really beautiful during the legislation, seeing a lot of collaboration and seeing people from different offices working with our members, working with the teachers, to ensuring that their voices are heard, and to ensure that also they're able to tell their testimonies during these budget conversations, which is something new that our coalition work led to, because usually in those spaces, you don't see members of the community, you don't see teachers going up there being able to testify and tell their story. And that's something that we created. That's something that we were able to do this year. And we should be very proud of that, because these budget conversations are so important and essential to ensuring that our communities are not left out, and we were able to be part of it.
Thank you. I'm just always so impressed and feel privileged to work with you guys. Just always. But in the time that we have left, what would you say is the challenging part? What was the most challenging part of this work, and how did you overcome it?
I could start. Like I said, El Centro has not been for years involved. We started, and it's a learning curve understanding the budget and how it works. So Voices has helped us tremendously in understanding. They've explained it to us with apples, and even then we're trying to navigate it, and then on top of that trying to explain it and also allow our members to learn the structure as well so they could be leading in the legislation session. But I think that's been the most struggle, is understanding, okay, how is that decided? Who's next? How can we ensure what's the next committee? So trying to understand how we could be more effective in these committee spaces of budgeting has been the most challenging.
I agree with Rosalinda. Just trying to, figure out what happens at the legislative sessions. Where do you go? When do you go? Who are you going with, which committee you're gonna speak in front of? And yeah, I think that was the most challenging, even just to find the right words to tell them how important your job is, and that we need the funding. So I think that was the challenging part. Plus also being at work and then wanting to be at the legislative session to say your part or be there for support. And so I think that was another challenging part, but I was grateful to have a director that would let me go and be part of it. So just working those kinks out was a good experience to be part of this movement.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Our final question before we get to some Q&A, we'd really love to hear, what advice would you have for similar groups and organizers, providers, coalitions in other states that are trying to advocate for childcare funding for early childhood? Where should they begin? What advice do you have for them?
I think what I've learned is collective work is more powerful. And I think if a group wants to make that big difference, I think it's finding other organizations that could also help push, because I think collectively we were able to accomplish what we did. And also there's so much expertise from other groups, I think. And it's always beautiful to be able to learn from everybody, from the teachers, from the youth, from experts in the budget. I think the more people you have on your table, the more successful and the more you could try to push similar connections and try to push this through.
Yes, just reaching out to the community and getting them involved in what's going on, educating them, and also doing a research on your elected officials and start building the relationships and the open communication, and yeah, just to get a lot of people involved, and that way people makes power. So with all the stories and that they tell will really help out with the negotiation with the decision makers.
I think also really celebrating those joyful moments, those wins that we had, those victories that we had each time, whether that was, we knocked this many doors all together or we made this many phone calls and text messages. I feel like it really motivated our communities to keep going, to see how many people we reached. It really helped to have those events where we talked about these things, because it showcased that we weren't just, talking to the void, we were really working together to make this happen. And also that it's a continuous thing, that we're going to continue to have joyful moments like this. and to celebrate them. And so that really, I feel like that really motivated our community to keep going, and also just showcase how many people were involved, because sometimes it feels like we have no support, but like seeing how many people showed up every single time was really amazing.
That's so true. And yeah, everything you all said, and I would just add that coming from the more traditional sort of early childhood advocate world, it's really important that folks really reach out and kind of allow space for that leadership and that thought partnership to come from communities, come from non-traditional allies who really know and are in tune with what these budget decisions, these policies, how they're going to impact communities. It really has to be that combination of grassroots and grass tops. And that sometimes requires some growing pains, some stretching from those traditional allies. So yeah, I would just add that.
Well, thank you all so much for just sharing all of your experience. And we do have some questions from the audience, so I'd love to share some. So the first question we'll tackle is, Idel discussed an aspect of y'all's strategy that included bringing legislatures into childcare spaces. What are some other creative aspects you all adopted in strategy that ended up being successful?
I think it's just a lot of communicating with the elected officials. If you can invite them to your events or meetings, go to their office and speak with them. But it's just important to include them. Yeah, we just like invited them to all our events to let people know that there are elected officials out there to support us.
Yeah, and I would add to we did a TikTok, like a campaign TikTok, and so we had a lot of legislators actually participate in our TikToks, which was really great. It was a creative way of like getting them involved so that we can spread the word out. And since we work with a lot of youth, it was really great to get them involved in these TikToks and to get more folks involved. And so that was really helpful because it I don't know, I felt like it was a space where they were like, oh, I'm just supporting and all I have to do is just a video. But it ended up becoming more as we grew in our membership, and as we started to see more folks involved. We got to the thousands on TikTok. I remember seeing, like, it was awesome to see that many folks wanting to do, these creative ways of, engaging more with the community to let them know that something's going on at the polls.
We also did a number of big events like rallies and press conferences. I know Centro, Rosalinda, you guys were heavily involved in that, but that was also a big thing, just to garner a lot of that media attention and get the traditional media there as well.
Thank you all for sharing. And our next question is, how did you all make sure that all the childcare professionals were engaged and able to voice concerns and priorities, thinking about workers, directors, and other staff?
We put up weekly meetings, and our members were out there also reaching out to their families, their friends, and then we were just sharing our Zoom link. Every meetings were held on Zoom, which is like convenient for everyone, so you don't have to travel here and there. So I think also going personally to daycare facilities, help to reach out to teachers, and also social media, spreading the word out.
For us, our members are like there's this word, passing the, what's it called, passing the movement. I like to say, like, they all know someone, and so if an issue is that inspirational for them, they'll get people out. They'll be like, hey, you have to come with me, this is super important. And so word of mouth is like our biggest thing. But we also ensured that our videos, all our social media was being passed, shared, and that the teachers or the parents or the person interested in the issue or passionate about the issue was telling their story, especially in social media, because it has become a huge way of people being able to know what's happening around us. We also had our people that worked in this industry and parents or our members who are passionate about this issue. They were the ones out there in the heat, ensuring that people knew that this was on the ballot. So our members who are impacted led this movement, either rain, sun, beautiful weather. They were out there. They were ensuring that people were turning out to vote and that they were supporting this, because who else is the trusted messenger other than the people impacted? And they know how to talk about this issue because they're living it. They're struggling. So we make sure that they understand the ins and outs, but it's their stories within every single person at the door or the person that they're talking to that make that difference of them wanting to also engage or also participate or ensure that this is passed properly.
Thank you. And our next question is, how did you determine that the land grant permanent fund was the best source of funding?
I could speak to that. So that decision was made, and those conversations were had well over 10 years ago. Our state's land grant permanent fund was established with our state constitution when we became a state, and it gets it comes from oil and gas revenue, right? So it's a large sovereign wealth fund, and it's invested in the stock market, and it's grown so huge over the years that even just the interest from that fund is really substantial. And the Constitution says that 5% of that can be taken out every year for public education. So that's K-12 schools and universities. So the constitutional amendment that we fought for would change the Constitution to allow an additional percentage to be added to that would go to early childhood education. And so we saw that as just a really good number one, because we really see that as the wealth of our state. That's the wealth that the workers of our state, the people of our state, this land, which originally belonged to indigenous people, it is the inheritance of our people, and that wealth should go toward our children. And since it's such a large fund and it's a permanent fund, we just saw that as a really good way to have sustainable funding for early childhood that didn't depend on a yearly budget cycle, which because of our dependence on oil and gas prices tends to go up and down. We'll have good years and bad years, and that means the budgets have to get cut for programs that are really important. So this permanent fund would help us be less dependent on that fluctuating budget cycle. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have just one more question. If someone can quickly answer, I would love to get to all the questions. Is the coalition organized around shared values and priorities? How did you all develop your budget and policy goals?
I could start us off on that. You know, like I said before, I mean, so much of our partnership has been based on just shared values about racial justice, economic justice, the coalitions that the coalition that came together is made up of organizations that just really kind of have a shared vision for the prosperity of New Mexico and for achieving that kind of justice. So a lot of it went really kind of unspoken, but in terms of developing more specific goals for the session and for these campaigns, it really required the combination of us, organizations like mine that are able to look at the budget line by line and say, okay, no, we need more, like, the voters approved this fund needs to be going to childcare, specifically, things like that. And then, I think a lot of it has been articulated by my colleagues here on the panel in terms of things like fair and just wages for teachers, right? I mean, that's something that's recognized all throughout the industry and state by state and nationally. That's a huge issue. So specific priorities like that, but I'll leave it for others to answer as well.
I think everybody that participates in the coalition shares the values base. And I think a lot of us want to do this work because we love our state and we want to see it succeed. And a lot of it has to do with like ensuring that our communities are doing well. So how can we ensure that those values are reflected within our coalition? So we always try to put what's better for our community members up front. And depending on because every organization does a different type of work. Like El Centro focuses a lot on workers' justice, workers' rights, civil rights. And so when we decided to do this work, we said, okay, how does this connect back? So what we're mostly focusing is on the wages, to ensuring that teachers are receiving dignified wages, not poverty wages, where they have to be like, I can't continue to be a teacher, even though I love it, or doing childcare work, because it's not making me meet at my house, and I can't be paying for my childcare and also being able to afford the economy right now. So I think all of us in our coalition work, we just connect what we already have established and connect into the needs of the coalition. And it's a lot of communication and allowing organizations to opt in and opt out and be able to share whatever capacity. Again, a lot of our coalitions have expertise in different areas. And I think our collective work has been able to show that we have been successful, and we continue to work well together because we have that flexibility and this great communication with us.
Well, thank you all so much. I think that is a great ending to a really inspiring conversation. And thank you all in the audience who are advancing early care and education nationwide. I know that I learned a lot about collaboration and looking at for those unlikely allies. And I hope that you are also able to take something away from the conversation today. Our team is also hosting another webinar tomorrow with advocates and administrators from New York and Michigan, who are also sharing some of their work in improving childcare policies and how they built strong relationships between advocates and administrators. And so we're sharing the registration link in the chat. Please feel free to join us, and thank you all again for joining us and for your commitment to this work. We hope you have a great week. Thank you again.